Democrats in the House ramping up pressure on what they say is blatant stonewalling and defiance by some of Donald Trump's top aides. Chairman Nadler told The Beat, if former White House counsel Don McGahn does not comply with this lawful subpoena, they will promptly go to court and force it. But now, McGahn might not even be as willing to listen to the Trump administration or Bill Barr telling him to defy subpoenas. And the reason is Donald Trump out here basically talking smack about him.
I was never going to fire Mueller. I never suggested firing Mueller.
That's not what he says.
Excuse, I don't care what he says. It doesn't matter. That was to show everyone what a good counsel he was.
Why would Don
But we
McGahn
had a
lie?
business.
Why would he lie under oath? Why would he lie under oath?
Because he wanted to make himself look like a good lawyer, or he believed it because I would constantly tell anybody that would listen, including you, including the media, that Robert Mueller was conflicted. Robert Mueller had a total conflict of interest.
The important part there is the president trashing his own counsel, McGahn, and alleging a crime, alleging that McGahn lied under oath to Mueller. So here's a question tonight. At what point does Mr. Don McGahn, who has a career and a life after the Trump era, at what point does he say, maybe I don't need to continue to try to keep Donald Trump's secrets and fight the House under this claim of executive privilege? Remember, this isn't just any witness. McGahn is more cited by Mueller than anyone else. He holds some cards that could shed light on this.
I knew he was going to
for an
testify.
interview. You didn't answer questions on obstruction.
No, wait a minute. I did answer questions. I answered them in writing.
Not on
I don't know about those. I don't know. I answered a lot of questions. They gave me questions. I answered them in writing.
Not an obstruction.
Look, George, you're being a little wise guy, okay? Which is, typical for you. Just so you understand. Very simple. It's very simple. There was no crime. There was no collusion.
John Flannery, former federal prosecutor, special counsel to 3 congressional investigations. Do you see anything here that undercuts the executive privilege claim?
Oh, absolutely. I think if there's a wise guy, the wise guy is Mr. Trump. And if there was any kind of privilege of any sort, he had to have waived it by calling his lawyer a liar in connection with sworn testimony before the special counsel.
What's privilege? If the core question is, did McGahn tell the truth or lie about Donald Trump's request to get rid of Mueller, and McGahn's talked about it under oath in a report that's public, and the president is now just ripping him over and giving his view, what left is secret and privileged?
Well, I don't think anything. You're right. Rolling it back, we have the president originally says, go up there and talk. And he knows that they do it, and he gets annoyed when he finds out how much he did. But then his hand-picked attorney general, who basically was doing whatever Trump wanted him to do, he approved the release of that information. And now we have, within hours, the president himself accusing, not just accusing McGahn of lying, but also disclosing the conversations.
The contents,
as he says it is, which very few of us believe. And so if I was McGahn's lawyer, he'd be up there tomorrow testifying. He's been called a liar. And I'd say I want it to be public. I don't want it hidden. I want the nation to know that what I did, I did. And then there are the corroborating witnesses. We have Christie, we have Priebus, we have Annie Donaldson, who keeps an infinite number of notes.
Take a look at this other exchange about the attacks on Mueller in the same interview. Take a look.
Sure.
If you answer these questions to me now, why not answer them to Robert Mueller under oath?
Because they were looking to get us for lies, for slight misstatements. I looked at what happened to people, and it was very unfair. Very, very unfair. Very unfair. I gave them 1.5 million pages of documents, right? I gave them 400 or 500 witnesses. I let Don McGahn testify. I let him he was the White House counsel.
John?
Yes. Well, the trouble with this is his impulses are all wrong for a defense, which is to our credit. We know as a nation how corrupt an individual he is. And he distorts in the interview when George says, you didn't answer any questions about obstruction. He said, yes, I didn't, and he tries to insult George Stephanopoulos. So he can't tell the truth, but when he does, he makes admissions. And that's the only thing you can probably rely on, and you can't take it to the bank 100% because he distorts even that. As for producing documents and so forth, did he produce the right documents and all the time? And if this is true, why don't we have them before the House right now? Why don't we have them before Senate committees who asked for them?
Do you think we'll ever publicly hear from Don McGahn?
Well, I can't imagine living a life keeping your mouth shut if you were McGahn and you defined yourself as a very capable lawyer who thought his legacy would be who he put on the Supreme Court, whom I would disagree with, Kavanaugh and other people. So I just can't imagine what human would put up with this abuse and keep their mouth shut. But I'm a kid from the South Bronx. What do I know?
Well, those who know John Flannery from The Beat know you to be full-throated and loud. The last time I really saw Don McGahn in a public forum was at CPAC in that one interview. But the president just called him a liar and a criminal. That's his old boss. He's got to decide what he wants to do about it, whether he's going to tell the truth in public. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.